No one ever said that everything was ever supposed to be perfect. I might have heard somebody tell me once that it was supposed to be worth it.
So here we are today, sitting with Medal of Honor recipient Ty Carter. Ty Carter, say quick hi, and then
hello, everyone.
There we go. I had the honor of being introduced and vouched for by a good friend of mine at a group called Military Badassery that we both know, Kelly Fromm. And I've known Kelly for a number of years. Matter of fact, he tried to hire me years and years ago, and he was... while he extended the offer, he held it off because the group we were working with couldn't follow through on some promises, so he didn't want to put me in a difficult position, and we just stayed friends. So I've always considered him honorable for that.
Yeah, he's been cool to me too.
Excellent. So I had the chance to come down here to Austin, Texas, and thank you for inviting me and allowing me in your home.
Yes, my pleasure, man.
That's pretty big, and I texted you to let you know I was going to be a little bit late, and I sent Kelly a text saying, best text reply ever. And your text reply was, you're good. I'm slaughtering a hog.
Yeah. This morning at around, I guess, 8:30, 8:45-ish, I look out my window, and I saw some movement out by the deer feeder. So I went to the other window, grabbed my rifle with a scope, and looked at the scope, and sure enough, there was a hog out there. So I stepped outside on my back porch, and bear in mind, I'm still in my, my underwear and my moccasins, and I shot my fourth hog in my backyard right off my back porch.
In your underwear?
In my underwear and my moccasins, yes.
That is absolutely perfect. Cool. So yeah, that was the best text I've ever received in my life, and it'll go on Instagram later saying best text reply ever. So I go into this, and it'll be redundant for my audience, but for you, kind of the reason I do these is I do topical things that interest me podcasts, video podcasts, multi-camera. But the veteran portion of it is a little bit personal for me in that I never served. I just didn't. For the last 5 years, I was primary caregiver for my World War II Navy dad. He passed in December after a long battle, but, he's 90, lived a good life. But in that 5 years as his caregiver, I had plenty of time in the VA. And regular hospitals, we got them declared homebound, so we had outside doctors could care for. And I had all these occasions to sit with vets that were getting treatment, and a lot of World War II guys that just happened to start telling me their story. And the reason it's so significant to me is my dad, just in the last year or two of his life, told my brother and I, bad teeth saved my life. And we were like, what? So I said, what are you talking about, Dad? And Dad said, well, in basic training, I had some bad teeth. They pulled them. I was a dental holdover. And while I was recovering, they sent my class to a ship, and that ship was sunk, and everyone died. And it really hit me that my dad had been living all those years with probably survivor's remorse.
Survivor's guilt, yeah.
Yeah, guilt. And that, that is a story or a way of relaying stories that was way too late, because I would be sitting in a hospital next to a gentleman that flew a bomber with no pilot experience because the pilot and first officer were hit. And I've told that story before, and I can tell you off the air, so we won't run this thing into 4 hours. But and another gentleman that was a Marine and had appendicitis in basic. He was going to the front line, and he while he was recuperating, they gave him an aptitude test, and he ended up being an aviator and flying for 30 years and seeing the whole world rather than going to the front line as an infantry. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but his life would have been totally different.
Yeah.
And he had never told that story till the end of his life.
Wow.
So I'm sitting here going, well, there's the heroes and the guys that write the books and the big stories and the Sergeant Yorks, but you also... there's a lot of incredible stories that are going to be lost because we're losing those guys. There's not many of them many of them left. So that is part two of why I do these podcasts and got into it, because I had the time to sit with Dad and really hear some of the stories, and had time to study how to do this. This is totally out of my comfort zone, but I wanted to do it. And also part of that is for 20 years I've been selling communication supplies to the military. So I'm very entrenched with that way of life and appreciative. And while I was a young man going, well, that's where guys that aren't going to college, that's where they go.
Yeah. It's a little different nowadays.
Well, nowadays, and it's all my best friends served from childhood and everything else. So I've come around on that.
It's interesting how you said that, people are starting to bring their stories out, especially the Vietnam, the Korea, World War II. In fact, I have a story that kind of matches what
Please share.
You went through. So the October 3rd, 2009 firefight happened, and I was scheduled to pull R&R or leave, home leave, in November right before Thanksgiving. And the firefight made world news. So my family all knew, and of course they were emailing me, and when I was able to get to the phone, I was able to call them. So I asked my platoon sergeant, I was like, hey, just give me can I have a copy of my sworn statement, 5 or 6 pages of step-by-step accounts of the firefight, because anytime somebody dies, is killed by the enemy, they do a very detailed investigation.
Sure.
So he gave me the copy, and I went through and I put little sticky notes on what an RPG was, rocket-propelled grenade, what the machine guns are, and so I took that home with me. And after about a week and a half in there, we were having dinner at my grandma's house, and my grandfather, Paul T. Anderson, is the only other member of my family that ever served, and he has a Purple Heart from World War II. So we're in the living room, everybody's in the kitchen doing stuff, and my grandpa says, okay, so what happened? And I said, well, I don't really want to talk about it, but here's the sworn statement. So he flips through the pages and he reads it, and he says, wow, that's horrible. Nothing like that ever happened to me. And I was like, really? Well, what happened to you? And so he starts explaining the situation. Now, I'm actually listening to him. I'm engaged. I'm trying to think of myself in that situation. And in my peripherals, the rest of the family started showing up. And they're all standing around. And so he explains what happened, and he folds the sworn statement over and hands it to me. And I'm actually walking through my aunts and uncles and cousins, and I didn't know there was an issue. Then I get to the kitchen, and there my grandma is, and she has tears in her eyes. She gives me a big hug. They've been married for over 75 years, and she says, well, I've never heard him speak about this. And the reason why the rest of the family was there, because they never heard him talk about it either.
Right.
So, I guess in order for a veteran or a combat veteran to express themselves in an environment to where they can be comfortable, they have to be with somebody that has either been through something worse or something equal, because they understand.
Yeah.
So he knew that I understood, and I knew that he understood, and he was able to express. And then about a year and a half later, he passed. Or no, a year and a half ago, he passed. And then Grandma said, can you please wear your uniform to the funeral with the medal? And I says, I will be there, and you don't even have to ask.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So he received his honors, and I admit I got very emotional.
Sure.
He's the one who helped me gut and skin my first deer. He taught me.
Nice. And that came in handy this afternoon, huh?
Oh yeah, no, this morning. In fact, you arrived just as we were hosing our arms and legs off from all the
perfect time.
The stuff that was carved off of the hog, which I try to use as much as the animal as possible. I don't just shoot him and let him lay. So I'm hoping that it'll be very tasty sausage in about 3 days, because it's soaking in a saltwater ice bath solution. So
yeah, I guess if I would have timed it right, I would have showed up in 3 days. And
you might. A good processed hog sausage is actually more tender, and with the spices that I got, it's more tasty than the stuff you buy in the store.
Oh, without a doubt. I've roasted a few hogs, and it's always peeling the bacon right off. And,
yeah.
Good stuff.
Yeah, same thing. Good stuff.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
Well, all right. Well, so there's a lot of subjects to cover, and I Googled you, of course, and YouTubed and everything else, and read Wiki and Wikipedia, and people can go online and see that story 100 times over. But I do want you to tell it here for my audience that didn't have the opportunity, but we don't need to take 2 hours to tell it, and I'm not saying that in a defamatory way. I'm saying there's so many things that you're doing that I want to talk about that I think people need to hear and want to hear.
The story is it's about 45 minutes, and I do it for a living. I have my own website, tyamcartermoh.com, and that's where individuals can request to me to make a public appearance or say the speech. Most of my clientele is corporations. They want to learn about leadership. They want to learn about sacrifice and camaraderie. And then the other side is the military, the law enforcement, the paramedics, the fire department, where they want to learn how to learn what post-traumatic stress is and how I coped. And so I used the firefight that day and the experiences before and after to help people understand more about themselves.
Sure. Well, lay it on us, man. It sounds like you got a script, not a script, but you've done it a couple of times, so there's a way you've let it flow, and I'll get out of the way.
I don't want to get into too much detail because when I do speak about it, I actually transport myself back there, and I relive every single moment. And I just got done doing that. I got back from Bulgaria, where we're filming the movie The Outpost, and for 2 weeks straight, I relived every single detail of the worst day of my life over and over again. Watched it on film, watched it happen, and I'll have to admit that there's been several times where I had to drop my shades because my eyes were welling up and take a walk just so I can remind myself that this doesn't exist, that has happened a long time ago. But so we're gonna go on the main tidbits. In fact, I would prefer if you'd ask specific questions instead of me going through the whole firefight.
I can absolutely do that. And then you made me think of something. So I've had the opportunity to sit with a Navy corpsman that went with the 1st Marines across the Pacific and was in, I always say it wrong, the Battle of Peleliu. I always say Peleliu wrong. And
Peleliu? That sounds Hawaiian.
It's out near Midway. In World War II, there was great controversy about what the Midway refueling point was going to be. And there was Midway, and then there was Peleliu, and they decided Peleliu was going to be one of those refueling points. So, long story longer, he was on the ship. Tokyo Rose told them they were coming, what they were going to do, and they were going to get their butt kicked and everything else. And then the commander came down and, well, yeah, she's right about where we're going, but 1 to 3 days max. Guys, we're going to lay so much down on this island, there's going to be nothing left. You're going to walk on and clean up, and then we're going to set it up for us for refueling. They got there, and he said the barrage they laid on was absolutely incredible. What they didn't know is the Japanese anticipated this, and they had sent miners months and months before, and they had dug trenches and mines. And
Same thing as, what was it, Iwo Jima.
Yeah. So they knew it was coming, and at any rate, when transports were coming on, they just got laid into, and he ended up accidentally becoming a hero because he went over the side and just went for the beach and ended up being first one on the beach for that battle. It was the largest percentage of casualties in any war in World War II, and he didn't find out he was a hero until about 5 years ago.
Yeah, hero. That word bugs me.
Yeah, I'm sure it does. But the point with him and a gentleman that survived Pearl Harbor, I was with him, and I noticed, especially with Walter from Peleliu, he closed his eyes a lot. And I asked him, I said, do you see that day when you do that? And he said, absolutely. And I was like, well, if this is painful, we can stop. And he goes, no,
It's supposed to be painful.
Yeah. He goes, that's the whole idea. And I'm not thrilled about it, but I'm proud of what I did and how I responded. And I miss my friends terribly. And he showed me all the memorials around the wall. But at 90 years old, he still saw it every day and thought about it. So I guess it's just part of life. There's no turning it off. There's no switch that says you're better.
It's in
better is not really the right word.
I'm not talking about the hero word. I'm talking about the not turning it off kind of a thing.
Yeah.
It's been 9 years since the firefight, and I remember it vividly. But it's the same way of remembering as if you woke up from a very interesting, detailed dream.
Sure.
It's there, but it's not there. And when the emotions come up, I guess the way I deal with it is like, okay, it was a long time ago, or that doesn't exist right now. But it fades with time unless you choose to stimulate it yourself, and then it becomes extremely vivid. But I mean, there'll be days where I've only thought about the firefight once because I see something or feel something, but it's always there. And you bring up the shoulda, coulda, wouldas. I should have done this. I could have done that. I would have done this if this and this. And honestly, after the firefight, it took me 2.5 years to accept what happened and that to believe that I couldn't change it. And counseling and friends and family, they helped me out a lot. And after that time, I was able to deploy again. So, and yes, people are like, oh, once you get the nomination of the medal, they don't deploy you. And I was like, no, there's still a mission.
Yeah.
We're still going to do the thing. And that's another misconception that after that firefight, everybody assumed that, oh, we went home. No, we didn't. We were still in country for 6 more months. We're still in several more firefights out in that area. It was the Wild West. The firefights were drastically reduced, but when we went on mounted patrols meaning you're on a vehicle, when we did that, we still get shot at all the time. Sure. I mean, we'd have kids throwing rocks and people throwing rotten fruit, and I got in trouble once because every time somebody threw something at us or our truck, I would aim my weapon at them. I don't care if you're 10 years old or 50 years old. If you're throwing something at me, that's an assault, so I'm going to prepare. Well, a piece of fruit can be a grenade.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
But our mission there, our hands were tied. The rules of engagement were so non-safe for soldiers that I tended to disregard and still try to protect my truck because I was the gunner. Okay. So I was in charge of protecting the truck and the guys inside. And if anybody looked suspicious, I'd roll my turret around and point the weapon right at them. And it's like, all right, make your move.
Absolutely. And I had the chance to talk with Sergeant Mack. I don't know if you know him.
The name sounds familiar.
Yeah, he's not Medal of Honor, Silver Star.
Mm-hmm.
And nominee. Same kind of thing. He came off as kind of a little bit cold, and then he would back up and said, I know what I'm saying right now, but when you're in that situation, it's either, my guys are unsafe or they're not.
Yeah. Man, woman, or child, if you're going to try to harm me or my family, because that's who they were in the truck. These were my brothers. You're going to try to harm me or my family. It's like, okay, then I am clear conscious.
Yeah.
I will do what I'm supposed to do because I'm a professional. I don't take it personally. I'm just there to protect the truck and handle the mission.
Right. And, we talked, we talked a little bit about, in a state park situation, once a bear or something gets a taste of blood, they kind of deem it a little bit dangerous, but yet we ask a human being to go in and turn that emotion on and then come out with just absolutely no regard for their mental state, if you will. Does that make sense?
It
say,
does.
Hey, all right, guys, kind of.
It does. The military.
They were asked to do something horrific, and
the military trains you to go to war, whether you're a trigger puller or grunt, or whether you're administration, or whether you're in the air or logistics. They train you to go and do your job. But a lot of these jobs that aren't trigger pullers, sometimes they have to be trigger pullers because they're on a convoy that gets attacked. And And they know their job really, really well.
Yeah.
The problem is that the military is just now learning that you also have to train them of what happens when something does happen and you come home. My first deployment, when we arrived back home, they said, okay, well, it's in processing because you're redeploying back home. And they says, okay, well, there's a counselor here, and you're sitting on a row, whatever. And they said, well, if any of you need to speak to a counselor, now's the time to do it. But the problem is that nobody's going to raise their hand because they don't want to be seen weak to everybody else.
Right.
Well, my second deployment, when we came home, there says, okay, you have 30 minutes with the counselor. You have no choice. Say what you want or don't, but you have to sit in that office with the counselor alone behind a closed door.
Good.
So in the end, you're removing the stigma
Right.
of, oh, I need help.
Right.
Well, you can receive help, and for people that actually do it openly, they will automatically be chastised. They will automatically be downgraded. So in the end, if it's required for everybody, what happens behind that door and whatever you say is between you and the counselor.
I'm glad to hear that.
So, but I don't know how it is now, because that was
Right.
that was 2013, 2014. I think they've improved it. I know they've done a lot of sensitivity training and stuff like that, but I was very impressed by the way they handled it. Instead of saying, okay, here's who's going to volunteer to seek a counselor.
Right.
Now it's like, I'm sorry, you're going to go in there. You can twiddle your thumbs, you can whatever, but you're going to be in there. Stare at the wall of the clock if you want. However, if you want to say something, you can, and it is confidential.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. I really am. So I'll hit a couple of highlights as I read them.
Okay.
And most of it had to do with you resupplying across a long area under fire.
Yes.
Bringing ammunition, gun oil, whatever needed, and then some folks being hurt, and you did this multiple times.
Yes.
So I have found, and I have nothing to compare this to, but I'll say I've been in some very tense situations, whether it be boating or whatever, that my head kind of never realizes I was in that danger. It was just like, yeah, it's acknowledged, but it's just something that has to be done.
Mm-hmm.
Is that kind of how you were feeling at the time, or were you just...
No, that's pretty much it. I have a job to do, and yes, this is happening, but I'm still going to do it. In fact, somebody asked me, and I was like, well, how do you mentally prepare for something like that? And I was like, well, you don't really, because you never know what's going to happen. But a long time ago, when this movie first came out, Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah.
Saving Private Ryan. So I was out of the Marine Corps, but, I was still thinking there might be a conflict, civil war, zombie apocalypse. If there was ever a situation where it was my job to run supplies or run ammo to protect my brothers, I wouldn't give myself the option to back down or be in fear because of the character Ompum, the translator writer. So when I saw that, I told myself, there's no way I would ever let my brothers, my family, my mother, my sister, whatever. There's no way I would ever let fear prevent me from doing what I know how to do. And, hey, it happened. In fact,
that's the one scene in the movie, by the way, that I don't watch a second time.
Every military guy that watched that, they want to find the actor and punch him in the throat. But the funny thing is Steven Spielberg heard about that, and he heard about that actually inspired me to have the mental thought process to not allow fear to control my actions. And this is when I was doing the Netflix thing. The director spoke with Steven Spielberg, and he says, hey, did you hear about this guy and what he did? He says that, yeah, his thought process was based off of your movie. And so he said that, that'd be nice to meet him. So maybe someday I'll meet the guy.
There you go. What Netflix thing? I didn't catch that part.
About a year ago, Netflix decided to do a documentary series on Medal of Honor recipients. And because I knew a guy who was the military liaison for Netflix, he calls me up and is like, hey, we're doing this docu-series about Medal of Honor recipients. Can you please connect me with the president of the society and foundations so that we can do this right? Because we want to be able to get in contact with them and also give the proper support to the families. It's like, yeah, sure, no problem. So I connected him with them, and then he calls me back and says, we've selected the firefight at Combat Outpost Keating. Would you like to participate in this? You know, it's going to be told no matter what, so you might as well be there. And I was like, oh, I'd love to. Okay. So a few months later, they told me, okay, here's the schedule. Would you mind being in L.A. for this week to assist in filming? So I says, yeah, no problem. So I showed up there, and I assisted with Clint Romaché's side, and then there was my side that we did it. And yeah, for about a week there, I was hanging out in L.A., and it was the same set where they filmed American Sniper.
Okay.
And that was excellent. It was interesting. The first time I was on a set, you know, a new experience, of course. Then, you know, they said, well, what's your legacy? And I says, well, what any man's legacy is, it's his family. And they said, well, when's the next time your family's going to be around? Because I've got, you know, 2 divorces and at the time I had a girlfriend of 3 years, and we chose to have a baby together. And I says, well, the family reunion in California, Carpinteria State Beach, is in July. But because my work's been slow and there's a bunch of things going on, I cannot attend because I can't afford to fly all my kids there at once. And I was like, okay, we'll take care of it. So they flew.
How Hollywood of them.
Yeah, of course. Because it's a docuseries. They don't really have contracts, so they don't pay you. So I was like, well, if this is going to happen, I might as well enjoy it.
Sure.
So we went to Carpinteria State Beach, and they had a film crew there for a few days, and they were just filming, you know, me hanging out with my kids, my cousins, my aunts, my uncles, my grandpa, my dad, and then they interviewed a bunch of them, and I was like, okay, well, when's this coming out? It's this time, and we're not sure though. And so as of about a week ago, the first trailer came out for Medal of Honor Netflix docuseries, right. And it premieres November 9th.
Nice.
So yeah,
it's an absolute watch for me.
It's I think they're 45 minutes long. I think there's about 15 minutes of reenactment, but mostly it's interviews with the family, the friends, generals, politicians, and stuff like that.
Okay.
But Netflix made another request. So on the 13th of November, I will be in D.C. for a private screening along with Flo Groberg, the other recipient. And after they do the screening, we're going to do a Q&A with military officials, politicians, you know, people that are doing that. So, you know, I get to take my new girlfriend to a trip to D.C., all expenses paid. They're going to take care of us pretty well. And I'm not a touristy guy, but she has never been there, so I might as well show her what I've seen and nice. Have a good time. But yeah, November 9th, Medal of Honor, Netflix docuseries. I think my episode is the last one, number 8, because my story is kind of unique. Okay. But yeah, that explains the Netflix thing.
Cool. Well, so what we'll do is we'll kind of leave how you earned. I always challenge myself with using the right words. Like, you correct me with the winner, and thank you for doing that.
Oh yeah, Leroy Peachy. I was at the White House for the Medal of Honor convention, and Trump invited all the recipients there. And as he was up on the podium speaking Medal of Honor winners, Leroy Peachy, the guy that threw a grenade and lost his hand, during the press conference, he actually got up and whispered, "Is like, hey, it's not a winner, it's a recipient." He's like, okay. And then he corrected it. And,
yeah, as he should have, because I mean that's important. Folks, go out and obviously watch the Netflix, but read up. There's plenty out there, and you can hear more. And we won't put Ty through reliving here today because he just got off the train, so to speak. A couple questions I had, and I jotted down. I'm looking over at my note here. I was surprised you served in 2 different branches.
Yes.
Of the service.
Marine Corps and Army.
So Army first and then Marine Corps? Or?
No, Marine Corps first. I joined the Marine Corps from Spokane, Washington in 98. Okay. I was there for 4 years, got out, was a civilian for 5 years, went to school, got pregnant, got married, got divorced, had many, many jobs that I either got laid off or fired from because my skill set didn't apply and my attitude or demeanor was not cohesive with the civilian environment. Mm-hmm. So after my divorce, I was working several part-time jobs, and I couldn't afford to pay child support. I couldn't even afford to support myself or even give her any medical benefits. So I thought, well, in the military, I knew what I was doing. There was a purpose to wake up in the morning. You were training to deploy. You were making a difference in the world. At least that's what I thought. And so I joined the Army. And a lot of people ask the question is, well, why didn't you go back to the Marine Corps? Well, I've got a very interesting habit of making mistakes.
Okay.
I got in trouble in the Marine Corps, and the day I got off of restriction, which is punishment, is the same day I started terminal leave, which means that it's the leave you saved up before you get out.
Correct.
So I, even though I love the Corps, there was a situation where I didn't trust my leadership anymore. So I thought, you know what? If I'm going to go in the service, I should probably go with a change. And the cool thing is that when you switch services, it's like you have a clean slate.
And that was going to be one of my questions: is does the next branch of service, do they just welcome you with open arms? Is it
they did?
They have the experience. So
they in fact, when I went into the recruiting office, they said that I would have to go through retraining. And I was like, okay, and then one of the guys was like, wait, hold on. And he points at a poster, and he's like, what's that? I was like, oh, that's a 249 saw. It fires a 5.56 belt fed, air-cooled, this. And he's like, okay, well, what's that? Oh, that's a Mark 19 fully automatic grenade launcher. Oh, what's that? Oh, that's a 240 Golf. It does this. And he's like, you don't need training. Just go to your MOS school.
There you go. There you go.
So I became a scout.
Okay, cool. So that was absolutely one of the questions. And then I read that you are really making a point of bringing awareness that there shouldn't be, and to ease or erase the stigma of PTSD.
Wow. Yes.
And I know that's a big subject, but
it is a very big subject, and I've been doing it for several years now. In fact, I was even doing it or trying to do it before the announcement came out that I was receiving the medal. Every time, because I had issues with myself after the firefight,
right?
And every time somebody said I had a disorder, and I questioned it. Well, you have post-traumatic stress disorder. And I was like, well, why is it a disorder? There's nothing chemically wrong with me. I just went through a firefight and saw a lot of things. And it got to the point when the announcement was made, I kind of understood why veterans from past wars and present wars were feeling horrible about themselves, because I felt horrible because I was chastised. I was put down. I was ostracized. If society labels you with a disorder, that means there's something wrong with you.
Okay.
So if you believe that there's something wrong with you and the counseling and the medication and all that stuff doesn't work, well, if you're not being healed and you're going through so much pain, then the only option is to end the pain, especially if you've been in combat. You've seen death. It's almost like you lose your fear. In the end, it's like not that you fear life or fear death. You're just kind of, you know what, I'm done. I'm going to make the next step, and they do it. So if we can remove the bad part about PTSD, if we can remove the D, you don't have a disorder. You just have stress from something that happened in your past. In fact, the most common form of PTSD is not combat. It's a car accident. This is like over the world. Loss of a loved one. This is a huge trauma that affects you. I just recently got my Associate of Science in Firearms Technology, and they required that I take a psychology course. And it's actually quite recent, in the last, 10 or 12 years. The Diagnostic Statistical Manual states that within 1 month, if you have a trauma, and you react to it in certain ways, it's called acute stress disorder. And then after a month, it's called post-traumatic stress disorder. And it's like, okay, so question, who decides how long it takes for somebody to mourn? Who decides what something is acute or something is post or whatever? So some, forgive the language, egghead somewhere who pretty much spends their entire life in books and writing reports, who's never really seen the world or whatever, decided that, okay, well, this is the standard, so we can label it, so we can put everybody in a little box.
Sure.
And then that little box got advertised by mainstream and social media. Now, every time somebody does something stupid, they say, well, he had post-traumatic stress, or she had post-traumatic stress disorder. And it's all complete nonsense.
Lumped into a big gray box.
Well, post-traumatic stress, the best definition I found, which doesn't really exist, it's something that I figured out accidentally, because I was sitting in an interview somewhere, and they said, well, what is it to you? And I said, well, it's an instinctive, reflexive response of your body and mind to recall a traumatic incident in order to avoid repeating it. At no point is combat mentioned, as no point of race, gender, color, or any of that ever mentioned. It's just who we are. Now, it's a learning instinct. For example, as a child, 4 years old, mom or dad is cooking on the stove, and you reach up to see what's going on, and no, don't do that. It's hot or whatever. And the parent keeps on slapping your hand away because they want to protect you from that trauma. So when the parent's not looking, you reach up and touch the hot pan. Now, at that age, of course, you don't understand the difference between ouch pain and life or death pain. So like a kid skins his knee on his bike, the whole world's ending, so you go nuts. And then, the parent's there, and they console you, they put it, you heal. Sure. And then 30 or 40 years later, 20 years later or whatever, every time you walk by a stove, what do you think?
Yeah.
Don't touch that pan, it might be hot.
Right.
You may not remember being burned, but you do remember that don't touch the stove.
Well, and I will tell you, just while you were talking there, so a year ago December, I was in a car accident.
Mm-hmm.
And we stopped hard for traffic in front of us.
Mm-hmm.
The guy behind us did not see us, was doing 70 and hit us and picked us up and lifted us over the car in front of us, and we tumbled and tumbled. I didn't have a scratch on me.
Mm-hmm.
Every window shattered, everything. My brother-in-law had a bump on his head and bit his tongue, but he was relatively unscathed as an outward appearance.
Mm-hmm.
Neck, back, everything pretty tore up. But I was warned the next day. A friend of mine said, PTS is, and I'm going to take on your way of saying it here because I like that. The PTS really is a real thing with people in car accidents, so you need to look out for that. And to this day, if I'm in a car, whether I'm driving or I'm a passenger, if we're stopping fast or hard on the freeway or even on a side street, I tense up and I start checking mirrors.
Yeah, you're waiting for that impact.
Yeah. And so...
But there's nothing wrong with you.
No.
You learn from something that happened.
Yeah, I'm looking for it.
Yeah, you're looking for it. Just like veterans coming back from the war, they see a box on the side of the road and they think IED because they got hit by an IED. Or when a man or a woman is walking in a dark area and they look for somebody that might attack them because they've probably been attacked before, or they know somebody who's been attacked. You don't actually have to go through a trauma, a physical or whatever trauma, to experience post-traumatic stress. You can actually have a loved one that did it. For example, car accident thing. If one of my kids got into a car accident and I didn't, but I heard about it and I saw them in the hospital or something like that, every time they get behind the wheel, I've got that trauma and I'm thinking about it. Or every time I'm behind the wheel, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I hope they're okay. Or I randomly call them up, because, you feel, you live vicariously through your kids or your loved ones. You empathize and that causes PTS.
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense. And I think about my kids now. I got a 20 and an 18-year-old, and I think about my little 18-year-old girl, my little girl.
Mm-hmm. They'll always be our babies.
Yeah.
I don't care how old they are.
She's at college, and I think about my time at college, and I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah, watch out for this. Look out for this, because I'm thinking about it.
Yeah.
Because it happened to me, and so you're reliving some of your traumas through her. But why is loving your kids or worrying about your kids, why is that a disorder?
In that case, I don't think it is.
No, it's totally natural. It's how we grow. It's how you learn how to ride a bike. You can't just ride it. You got to fall over, and then you're like, oh, well, I'm going to correct this next time, and I'm not going to do it. And usually it requires some pain or some fright, and then your body and mind learns. So, but these doctors, these people, they call it a disorder, and then the media thinks, oh, you have a disorder, so you have an infectious disease, or the old term was you're going to go postal, or you do something stupid. So, it's not that. Now, I've been speaking to several counselors throughout the years on how to change it, and they says, yeah, the only way to change it is to change the way people view things, and that's with the diagnostic statistical manual, and that's what everybody follows, and that's what everybody goes with. And I was like, well, I guess that's where my goal is, to change it. And I just think that removing the D is a stepping stone to remove the stigma. The way it's presented in the media, because everything has to do with information.
I can't say I disagree with that at all. I think that's a great idea, and why not?
Yeah, and when people are like, well, I thought I had disorder, and it's like, you know what, that's because you were told, you were misinformed. You have a trauma that you're learning to deal with. You're learning that, you know, you don't live in a bubble.
Yeah, nobody's life's perfect.
No, exactly. But people want to think that normal is normal. Abnormal is normal.
Right.
There's evil in the world, and bad things happen. If you live your whole life with a silver spoon or a gold spoon, and everybody provides for you, your trauma, no matter how big or small, is actually a lot worse than somebody who's grown up in poverty, because they've experienced steps of trauma. So something like the stock market crashing, it's no big deal to them. But for somebody who relied everything on the stock market and they never lost any money, or they always had car service, sure, they might actually, drink a bottle of Jack and fall out with a 45.
There you go.
You never know.
You really don't. And we were talking about PTS, and we were talking about all civilian life and military life, how it kind of crops its head.
Yeah.
A group that I work with, I did a podcast with the founder in Detroit area in Michigan, is Wyandotte, Michigan. It's called Downriver, so South Detroit. A lady started a group there, and they got a kind of part-time therapist. I'm probably saying that wrong. It's a therapist, but not
counselor.
Yeah, but they're not necessarily there to be the true therapist role. Mm-hmm. They're having once a month now, and they don't care if it's one person or 20. It's a PTS focused discussion. Mm-hmm. Just come in and talk.
Yeah.
No rules, no nothing. He's kind of moderating so things don't get out of hand, but it's not like you need to talk about this unless here's how we're going to shape it. It's trying to just get people in to get in, and exactly what you're saying, I think, is to destigmatize and say it out loud.
The best treatment for post-traumatic stress is communication. It's forcing yourself to speak about the moment, therefore reliving it. And when you do that, because I have to do it at least once a month, when you do that, your body and mind aren't trying to force something on you. Individuals that suppress their memories or say that didn't happen or something like that, they're the ones that receive the nightmares. They're the ones that receive the flashbacks or the flinches, because their body and mind are trying to remind them something that actually happened and what's really there. So a lot of nonprofits, they create veteran outings. Now, the veteran outing will work as long as the veterans are in a safe environment, or anybody that's experienced a trauma, as long as they're in a safe environment to where they're with individuals that have shared like traumas, then they communicate. But in the end, the fishing, the hunting, the horseback riding, that's all a distraction. People are like, oh, I'm going to go skydiving, and it's to treat my PTS. It's like, actually, no, just skydiving is a distraction from your PTS.
Okay.
True treatment exists when you choose to acknowledge it. And this is not supposed to be a happy thing. It's gonna suck. If you choose to relive it, if you choose to experience it or express it, then other people understand you better. But every time you do that, it's like you have a festering wound. You open it up. It's going to bleed out. It's going to clean itself. But like all wounds that haven't been healed, it's going to do it again. And you have to keep on doing that. Well, eventually it starts to scar over, but it's still always there. You just know how to deal with it. The misconception is that, if we give these guys and gals this outing where there's a lot of fun and everything else, then it'll help them. And it's like, you know what? You're right. They're with like individuals, and they're having fun. And they'll be smiling, and they'll be having a great time. But in order for true healing, you have to go through the pain. You have to force yourself to push through. And as you do that, you figure out how your body and mind reacts to these stimuli, and then you can learn to correct it. So the proper treatment for PTS is either peer counseling, individuals that shared like traumas, or just having close friends and family members that understand what you're going through, or at least you've explained it to where when something is arising or there is an issue, they know exactly what to do to assist you.
That's a great point. Again, you're saying things that are ringing true with me, and I have recent examples for. So I was traveling last week from Annapolis. I couldn't get back to Arizona, and I had a friend in Nashville that I graduated high school with, and I called him, and he goes, "Come on out. Well, just so happens my girlfriend's out of town this weekend. We'll sit down and have a drink and catch up, and you can crash with me." So that was great. So I stopped, and what I forgot was his dad and my dad were approximately the same age, and they passed away within 6 months of each other and had very similar backgrounds. So we ended up very therapeutically, I think,
Talking about them.
Mm-hmm. Where even with my own family, I didn't necessarily talk about my dad and those certain things. We just had something in common, just like you just mentioned. And it was a safe environment because it was just us two, and we
Mm-hmm.
both wanted to talk about that particular subject, so it wasn't uncomfortable to the other person.
Mm-hmm.
So you're exactly right; it was a safe environment, and
That's
I
the
got
best treatment.
I got a great, it was 5 minutes, but it was absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, medication is not going to change it. Medication actually dulls it to where
Yes.
you don't experience it, and then once you get off the medication, you have to relearn how to experience these emotions and re-see these traumas. So in the end, zero medication, safe environment, individual to speak to with like traumas. And that is the best way to open up and get the elephant off your chest, because you're not alone. All of us, ever since we were kids, I mean, there's only two real guarantees in life. That's pain and death. Even when the sperm cell enters the egg, it secretes acid, and then the DNA combines, and there's ripping and tearing and everything. Life is supposed to be pain. It's just our bodies learned how to adjust and ignore what is good pain and bad pain. So this is just another example of how are you going to cope with this type of good or bad pain. And once you realize it, then it actually becomes pretty easy.
All right, I'll go with that.
Yeah, it's an opinion.
Yeah,
We may have to remove that. I don't know.
No,
Because people are going to be like, no, life is joy and everything. Really? Okay. Well, when you went to the gym, how sore did you feel? Oh, very sore. Well, that's pain.
And that's part of learning is, they taught us that in management class a long time ago, is you learn at a gradual slope, and then it eventually plateaus.
Well,
Until
even
you have an oh shit moment, you don't start learning again.
Well, even with going to the gym, yes, it's painful. Yes, you experience pain. But if you force yourself to go to the gym, if you force yourself to, get sore, you become stronger afterwards.
Sure.
And that's one of the reasons why I chose to be a part of the film that's coming out next year in the fall, The Outpost by Jake Tapper. I participated in the movie. I have a few scenes that I'm in, so yay,
Cool.
movie star. Not
Yay.
really, though. But I was the advisor for the firefight, and I knew it was going to hurt going there, and it did. But the more it hurts, the more I force myself to deal with this issue, the stronger I am.
Sure.
Even when I came back that first day or two, because I've been back for like 3 or 4 days, the first day or two, my girlfriend said, "Wow, you're really distant." And I apologized, of course. I didn't mean to be, but I basically dissected every single moment of that day and had to watch other people act it out.
And to use your analogy, you just pulled the scab off,
and
cleaned out the wound again.
So it takes a few days. Even after I speak about the event, I usually require a day and a half of rest because my body and mind are like rebooting. And I don't like doing it, but I know it's necessary. That's why I continue to speak about the firefight, and I set up a business about it. But when people learn their cycle, when they learn themselves, then a lot of things, they make more sense. And so part of my job as an educational, motivational speaker is to help to teach people about themselves. I'll tell you what I went through. I went, this, and that through the lecture, the speech, and then through the question and answer, people ask me questions about the traumas they've experienced or their kids have experienced. And I even had, through my business phone, I even had phone calls requesting, hey, my son went through something or my daughter went through something. Can you please just call them? I heard what you said, and I think you can help them out. So when I have spare time, I'll just, hey, how's it going? So-and-so told me to call. I won't even tell them who I am. And we'll just talk. And sometimes it's 30 minutes. Sometimes it's a few hours to where I have to hook my phone charger up. And afterwards, they just are like, I've never thought of it that way. Kind of like how you said that my view of PTS is very unique and different, but it makes sense.
Sure.
Before I came up with this idea, I have no formal psychology training or anything like that. It's from my own experiences and how many counselors I went through. Yeah, I don't get along with counselors very well. Let's just say we don't share the same opinions on things. Because they learned it from a book, and they don't apply it to their lives. I learned it from my life, and then when I got my associates, I learned it from the book, and I was like, this does not make any sense. Who wrote this? Yeah. I'm like, really? Does this person ever experience this severe trauma?
You know, and again, not to your degree at all, but so I went to college. I went to a year and a half, and I dropped out. I took a 8-year semester off, and I ended up working for Southwest Airlines. Mm-hmm. And then I went back to school. I want to go finish my degree. Yeah. So many times I was still in a Southwest uniform when I went to class, and I was taking business. Mm-hmm. Probably 7 out of 10 case studies in that business class was always on Southwest Airlines, because at the time they were meteoric rise. Okay. They were in their huge growth period. So I'd be sitting there in a Southwest uniform learning about Southwest and their business, and exactly what you said, I had experienced it, and now as I was learning about it, like from the books, mm-hmm. and it made much more sense. When I went to school when I was much younger and no experience and no life experience, none of it applied, none mm-hmm. of it mattered, so it didn't take.
Kind of like learning a language. Yeah. You can read about it, you can study it, but until you're in the country and
until you immerse
speak
yourself,
then it doesn't exist.
So, all those parallels apply. Thank you for it's been a great day for me. I feel like I've been in therapy.
You know what? I get that a lot. I don't like to be referred to as a counselor, because I've had a lot of bad experiences with counselors.
Well, sure. I heard you saying. Well, let me ask you this then. So today is your main, I don't want to say your main source of income, but a source of income is speaking at sales events. And again, I come from 20 years of selling communication supplies for some big companies mm-hmm. to the military. So I've been in plenty of sales meetings where the fighter jet pilot comes in, the pump it up guy. I don't know if you've ever seen him.
I haven't, but yes, it is a source of income, but it's not really a sales meeting. I mean,
I understand, but
anybody who's willing to fill out the contract and it might be inappropriate, but pay the price that I'm asking, they're going to get the full thing. They're going to get the firefight. I ask them, well, what direction do you want me? Do you want leadership? Do you want camaraderie? Or do you want it specifically on PTS? And then I do that. I've done many events with nonprofits. I've spoken at schools from, grade school all the way up to universities. It's just people need to know, and they want to know what's going on out there in the world, because the media doesn't tell you very much, and the only way to hear it is from somebody who's been there, or you go there yourself, and most people can't do that. So if you're a corporation or law enforcement or even a university doing a school project on what the Medal of Honor is, or on what valor or courage or intrepidity, and that's it's a funny word. It took me a long time to figure out how to say it right. So people are like intrepidity or intrepidity. No, it's intrepidity.
So what is that? Tell me.
It's in the citation. For every Medal of Honor citation, they have that intrepidity. Now, I've read the definition of what intrepidity is, but I'm still not sure exactly what it is.
So intrepid, is that the base word?
Intrepidity.
I know, but intrepid is the base word, and
you're speaking Latin now, so I don't know, but at least I learned how to say it right, and I know the general idea of what it is, because every time somebody reads the citation before I speak, I says, okay, you see this word, this is how you say it. And they're like, okay. And half the time they're like, yeah, I got it. Okay. And they say, and then they read it and they're like, this is spelled weird to where it sounds like, and then they mess it up. So it's like, all right, well,
Nice.
I told you.
Nice.
But whatever.
All right. Okay, I got you. So let me ask you: were you honored when you were given the award, or
I
earned
was.
it? I don't even know how to say it correctly, or when it was issued.
When I was first notified that I was nominated for it, I was actually very upset. I was very angry. They're not supposed to tell you that you're nominated until you get a call from the White House or whoever. But it was right before the memorial. We were still in Afghanistan, and my platoon sergeant pulls me aside and says, "Oh, by the way, you were nominated for the Medal of Honor." And I was like, I was angry. I was like, "You really think I care about a medal right now?" I didn't even really know what it was.
for doing my job.
Well,
Yeah,
I was
no?
more focused on during the firefight. I lost my roommate, and I lost my weekend shooting buddy, and I didn't even see them that day, other than running by, and then I also remember what I did and everything like that. But the first time I heard that I was nominated, I was upset. But then I got arrogant and I got pompous, and then I started acting like I was better than people because I didn't know what the medal was. I just like, oh, it's the highest medal, so So I was rude and inappropriate to a lot of my unit, and they responded, of course. And still to this day, a lot of them still have a lot of resentment for me, and I don't know how many times I can apologize for how I was and how ignorant I was. But they're starting to come around, I guess, through time. Time heals all wounds.
Sure.
But I'm hoping that with the way I'm being honest about how I perceived it and how I was.
Sure. And thank you for that.
It's more for them to let them know that I now know how I was, and I apologize, and hopefully they can come around. And even with the movie, I'm very arrogant, I'm very conceited, but I still did these things because I cared about the men around me. And of course it was my job. So that's one of the things that I guess getting older and more mature, you realize that some of the mistakes you made were because of your own ignorance and your own choices. So hopefully it'll change.
Well, there's no rule book on how you deal with that.
Plus, I'm still socially awkward.
Are you?
I'm very, very socially awkward.
That's funny. I'll interrupt you for a second. I didn't realize that. So way back in the day, they used to give us the Myers-Briggs test all the time, which was introvert, extrovert.
Oh, okay.
And I used to score off the scale extrovert.
Mm-hmm.
Then I got married, and over time, it kind of evened out.
Yeah.
But the interesting part, what you just said, was our instructor said, "Okay, how do you think I scored?" And she was the best instructor I ever had, and very outgoing and gregarious and everything. And we all said, "Well, you must be off, top of the scale extrovert." And she's like, "No, I am as high as you can go on the introvert side. Outside of the classroom, I am very different."
Yeah.
So having said that, what I'm comparing to you, or the analogy is, outside of speaking to people,
Yes,
about that, you're a different person.
I'm a very different person. But I know that I'm a different person, and I try to do things to correct that.
I don't know if it's correct. It's just
not correct is an improper word. To adjust it to where I can be more socially accepted. The only time I've ever been an extrovert growing up and everything else is when I sang karaoke, which is also one of the reasons why I can stand up and embarrass myself in front of a group of people speaking and still keep my composure. But when I'm not doing my speaking thing, I'm basically I'm in my home. I stick my foot in my mouth all the time when I'm out and about. if there's something going on that I disagree with, instead of trying to fix it or cope with it, I just say I'm not going to deal with it, and I remove myself from the situation. And this started when I was in grade school. If I didn't like what was going on, I just left. I just didn't deal with it, or I just did my own thing. In fact, my brother, I would consider him an extrovert. He was always the popular one. He was always going out with friends. He always had the cute girlfriends. And then there's me. I was in my basement, making firecrackers or building models, always by myself. In fact, anytime my brother messed up, my mom would say, "All right, go to your room." Anytime I messed up, she's like, "All right, go outside."
Yeah. Okay.
So
I've heard that about different folks. Interesting. Anything you wanted to cover today? Or I know what I want to ask you about. You mentioned when I called you that you do a little bit on your ranch out here of self-sustaining. You're not going to call yourself off the grid, but you're
no.
You enjoy doing some things around here.
After, I've always had a distrust of authority. That's kind of how I've always been. But after the firefight and after being stationed at Combat Outpost Keating, I've had a overall, I wouldn't say distrust, but a questioning of government authority.
Okay.
And if, the United States of America, we're one of the richest countries on the planet, and we have the most technology, or not the most, but we have almost the most technology, education, healthcare, all these things. We have almost the best of the best. But with all this intelligence, with all this money, why would they put us in the bottom of 3 mountain ranges and just tell us to stay there and try to do your job? Even after or during when the medals were awarded, Army Investigation stated that combat at Post Keating was indefensible, and that's what our mission was. So, with the government so grand and great, why would they put, sons and daughters there to die?
Okay.
So I kind of had this feeling of that maybe I should rely on myself more than government agencies. So I've been training myself. I built guns. I make my own black powder because I have muzzle loaders. I've got bees in the back. I butcher. As we spoke earlier, I process my own game. I tan my own hides. I make some of my own clothes out of the hides. I brew my own beer. I built guns. They call them ghost guns because they don't have a serial number, but it's completely legal. And I find an art in everything. I also trained as a rock climber. I'm not necessary to lead climbing level, but top roping.
Good.
I garden. I preserve stuff. I jar stuff. I can stuff. I'm doing everything I can to where if the power goes out, if the government fails, I will be okay. Their money doesn't exist when that happens because the government supports the dollar, the U.S. dollar. So in the end, if something does go wrong, it's going to be all trade. So I've learned how to grow my own tobacco. I roll my own cigars, and of course everybody loves beer, and I make my own guns. So I'm basic. I need a T-shirt that says ATF, alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, and then put a big sign out front and it's like, I'm here to trade if everything falls, zombie apocalypse or. So
will you ever read the book 1 Second After?
I don't think so. I don't think I've read that.
So 1 Second After is everything with electronics quits working.
Okay.
Immediately.
So like an EMP kind of thing.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
In end of the book, they speculate on what happened, but basically anything with electronic chip quit working, which included most cars. So the old hippie VW mechanic became very popular.
Yeah, I got a '96 Toyota out there.
There you go.
So I may have a microchip. Oh, that's another thing. I'm learning to distill, because if you take 95% ethanol and mix it with gasoline, you increase the volume of gasoline. You just have to have a vehicle that will accept it, or at least know how to change the compression to where your vehicle will accept it.
Okay. Yep.
So yeah, fuel is gonna be a thing and all that stuff.
Fuel and crazy things, not crazy things, but crazy little concepts came to light in the book. For example, after a month, they had formed a little group that were advisors, and one of them happened to be a retired general from the Army, and he had moved back to this little town because his wife was sick, and that's where she was from, and she had passed, but he slowly accepts more of a leadership role in the town group, and they have a doctor as an advisor, and the doctor said, okay, I'm starting to believe you guys that power's not coming back anytime soon. So I need to make everybody aware that 60% of this town are on antidepressants. And a certain percentage of those people are on antipsychotics. And a certain percentage of those people...
Was this town in California?
No, it's
Southern
in,
California?
Asheville, North Carolina.
That's a joke, by the way.
Yeah, that's funny.
Because I think everybody I've met in Southern California is on antidepressants or antipsychotics.
Great point. But his point was everybody in the town is going to be coming off their medication at the same time.
Yeah.
And this poor guy in the book, his daughter was diabetic, and you have to keep that cool. So the only way he could keep her medicine cool was, one, he went and got extra, but then he took it to the basement and put it in the toilet bowl to keep it cool, and things they had to do in old folks' home, senior citizen complexes, or assisted living doctors and nurses abandoned because they had to go home and take care of their own families. So old people were left to die, on and on and on. People came in to steal the drugs. And
there's a trick about keeping things cool in the desert without a refrigerator.
I want to say I've seen it, but remind me, what is that?
Well, there's always bearing it, but if you want to freeze water in the desert without a freezer, you need ethanol.
Okay, so when it reacts with the air...
It reacts with the air. It evaporates cooler than freezing, so you can take a little packet of water, put it in a sock, soak the sock with, whatever, and just spin it. And the heat of evaporization actually chills and freezes the water.
Now you're going to make me try that.
Oh, it's going to take a while. That's a lot of ethanol, though.
Yeah,
if you can afford that,
because it'll keep evaporating so quickly.
Yeah, it'll start to freeze things.
I got you. Well, yeah. 1 second after, if you ever want to read it, supposedly Newt Gingrich wrote the foreword and took it into Congress and slammed it down and said everybody needs to read this.
I've purposely avoided reading any type of books on PTS, on trauma, on combat, or any of that stuff, because I am now restarting my book, and I'm hoping to get it published at least a few months before the Outpost movie comes out, so it can gain the momentum. But I'm unpacking my office right now, and I need to actually just start. Now that assisting the movie is mostly over, I can really bear down and get that done.
Good. I just watched a podcast on a writer, and he was talking about his process, and they go, okay, do you write at a computer? And he's like, no, that's typing. I handwrite everything.
Oh, my handwriting's terrible.
Same with me. But when I heard him, it kind of made sense. As I said, he goes, I handwrite my notes and my outline, and then my thoughts and my ideas, and then when I'm ready, when I'm trapped on an airplane and I can't go anywhere, then I type.
I do one of those little recorder things. And then I also invested in that software where you speak into a mic and it types.
Speaking?
That kind of stuff. And so you just got to learn the lingo, and then you can just, have your bourbon or whatever, sit back and start telling stories, and it just shows up on paper. It's going to take forever to correct and move stuff around because I talk in sometimes sentence fragments and sometimes paragraphs with no periods and stuff like that.
Yeah,
so,
right with you.
But that's the next, that's the next major push in between the the taking care of my bees and taking care of my my snake. Did I tell you about the snake?
No.
So another thing, I rescue and relocate bees as a hobby because I love my bees, and so I have the phone number for local tree service. But I also have the equipment if somebody has a venomous reptile at their place and they don't want to kill it, then they can contact me. Well, I was driving along the road and there's this snake out in the middle of the road, and I was like, wow, I don't want to run over it. And then I started teasing it. It wouldn't go anywhere. So I just tossed it in scooted it in the bag with my boot, and it turns out it's a 1.5-foot long copperhead.
Oh, geez.
And I've worked with venomous reptiles and scorpions since I was a kid, and it looked like it was healthy. So I brought it back to my home, put it in a tank inside my bedroom, and it's already eaten one mouse, so it looks like it's getting healthier. And yeah.
You have a copperhead rattlesnake?
No, it's not a rattlesnake. They don't. It's a venomous reptile. Rattlesnakes have the rattle.
Right.
Copperheads do not, but they are beautiful.
Huh.
But I never touch it because I don't want to die.
Good point.
I have the tools, and yeah, it's got a little heat pad, and it's nice, a little water rock, and every well, depending on if it wants to, every 1.5, 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, if it wants to, I just put a mouse in there, and it eats it up.
Think it's happy in there?
I don't know, because anytime you bring a wild animal into captivity,
That's my question.
you can't really. So I don't know. I do know that because it's been eating more, and so it's become a little bit more aggressive. So it'll look at me when I'm walking by, or when I put my face over the screen and I breathe, it'll actually strike at the air that I'm breathing. So it's like, oh, well, maybe he's healthy enough to where I should release him soon, or because I know a lot of people around here don't like, exotic animals or dangerous animals. I love them to death.
I wonder if that's part of a adrenaline thing.
I think it's a part of a respect thing.
Yeah.
Just like a firearm or a beautiful woman. As soon as you disrespect it, it's going to hurt you.
All right. I'll go with that.
Yeah, we're probably going to have to keep that quote in there.
I love that. All right. Let me ask you this. I've never met a president.
Okay.
Keep all political opinion out of it. Just the whole process of meeting a president. Can you...
Well, I don't know the whole process. All I know is how I felt when I first met a president. It was Barack Obama, and I was very nervous. And I'm standing there in my full uniform, about to go into the Oval Office, and the Marine security guard there was, "Are you ready to meet the president?" And I looked at him and I was like, "Is anybody ever ready?" And he's kind of laughed a little bit, and then President Barack Obama opened the door and he shook my hand and he said, "Thank you for coming." And he's tall, and he was a basketball player. So when he shook my hand, his hand wrapped all the way around. But I was amazed by how soft they were. I was like, wow, this guy's got really soft hands. So we went into the Oval Office, and all the ladies, he would hug them and kiss them on the cheek. And it was funny because my wife at the time, she starts prancing over to me. She's like, "Oh my gosh, the president kissed me! The president kissed me!" And then I looked over and I said, "Honey, he's kissing all the women." Ooh. She gives me a dirty look, and she's like, "Don't take this away from me." And I'm like, all right, whatever. So we hung out in the Oval Office, and he spoke to my kids. He spoke to me. I didn't agree with a lot of his policies, but he's still the president. And so it was basically yes sir, no sir. And then when he talked to my stepson Jaden and my daughter Madison, Jaden talked about his football and his wrestling. Madison talked about how fun dress shopping it was for that event. And basically he treated us like we were at a barbecue. Very friendly, very open, very relaxed. And then we walked past the Rose Garden and then on to the rooms where they have the waiting areas, the green room, the yellow room, and all that kind of stuff. And so there I am next to a general, and then the president of the United States and the vice president, and they all, "Okay, you need to go." And then, okay, everybody left. And so we're sitting there, standing there, and all of a sudden you hear the dun, 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 dun. And he's like, all right, Staff Sergeant, let's go. And I was like, "No, sir, that's your song. Go for it. Go ahead." He's like, "No, come on." So we walked up together, and and then I stood there on the stage, and there's reporters everywhere, and all you hear is the clicking of cameras and the flashes, and everybody's like, "Oh, so did you feel so honored to be up there standing and so, proud?" And I was like, honestly, I was thinking, wiggle my toes, bend my knees, don't pass out. Wiggle my toes, bend my knees, don't pass out. I was scared.
Sure.
But, and then I was looking out into the crowd, and I had over 42 family members, plus about 10 to 15 of the guys from the unit. And I was like, you know what? You need to focus on what's going on right now. So I tried to make eye contact with every single person there, because when you hit a jump skiing, like snowboarding, or when you hit a bullseye, it's nothing unless you can share it with people you love.
Yep.
So I would have been there all by myself, staring at a crowd, that I had people I didn't know, but I had loved ones there. I had family, I had friends there, and they were experiencing this with me. And because I could bring them there, it actually made me proud to have my family there and appreciate this interesting and wonderful thing. And a lot of my aunts and uncles and cousins, they said that's the best trip/vacation we've ever had.
Sure.
So they're extremely proud.
Yeah, it wasn't just going to a beach. It was going to
Yeah,
watch a family member being
honored. You know, hey, I'm a piece of you. You're a piece of me. We're all together here. And they went to see the museums and the monuments, and you know, police were always there, and there was always escorts and military people, and it was very cool. It was very overwhelming for me, though.
Well, putting the award aside, just the fact alone that you could do that for your family.
Yeah, no, I was like, I'm gonna bring as many. I was like, how many invitations can I get for this thing? And they're like, well, how many do you want?
50?
A lot, a lot. Well, what do you mean? I was like, most of my family is Mormon. There's a lot of kids in my family, and a lot of aunts and a lot of uncles, so a lot. So yeah, they had to do the background checks for the Secret Service and all that stuff. I've only had one family member that was denied because they had a rough past, but other than that, it was an epic event. I really wish I could have enjoyed it more.
Yeah, no
because
it's kind of like your wedding.
No, it's just it was go. Okay, you have to. As soon as they put the medal on me, they shift me, you know, as we left and shook hands, we went into another room. And then there was a guy there that removed my entire rack, you know, with all the ribbons,
right?
Replaced it with a pre-made one that had the Medal of Honor ribbon on there.
Oh.
And he says, okay, you've got about 2 minutes to get a drink of water. You got your press conference outside of the White House right over there. Okay, you good? Okay, here's your list. Go over your lines. Okay, all right, go. All right, fine, walking out there. And I think that was the first time I got saluted was from one of the Marine security guards.
Right.
And I was, I don't know what to do. Okay, salute.
Yeah.
You know, do I'm supposed to stand still when I do it? No, I don't know.
Huh. Interesting.
And then got back inside after the press conference, and then public affairs people says, okay, don't talk to anybody. Grab some food. Shove it down your mouth as soon as you can. Don't talk to anybody. Just get there. And then I was like, oh, why is that? He says, because if you don't eat now, we don't have an opportunity to eat for the next 4 hours. So I was like, okay. So I cut in line. I'm sorry I cut in line. And I grabbed it, and I was shoveling it in my face. And then I kept on getting taps on the shoulder. And I was like, hold on. And then, I mean, it was like 4 or 5 hors d'oeuvres, but it was something.
Right.
And then I stood up, and there was 3 lines of family members and friends and politicians and everybody, and all of them wanting to shake hands and do pictures. So within a blink of an eye, another hour and a half went by, and that was being pulled away to somewhere else. And then I did, another interview, and then another interview. Okay, get to the hotel, take off your uniform so that you can relax a little bit,
But they had it down to the minute exactly what you're going to be. They do that. That's
gosh.
Their normal.
Yeah,
they do that every day, right?
That's public affairs. It's the security people, and then for 2 weeks that went on.
Whoa.
Yeah, two week tour. So it was D.C., then it was New York, and then it was L.A. And visiting amusement parks, water parks, talking at universities, just doing all this kind of stuff.
How crazy was that?
Like I said, it was a blur. 2 weeks was gone, just okay. And then as soon as I got back to my unit at Fort Lewis, they transferred me to the public affairs office. And that was my job for the next several months until I got out of the military. I was just constantly traveling, constantly speaking, meeting people. On a very busy month, I could say that I've met over 5,000 people in 1 month.
Wow.
Just handshakes, pictures, make sure you hold your hands properly, shake this way, smile this way. Always, when it comes to ladies and men, always keep your eyes above the chin because the camera can see if you're checking somebody out. So, yeah, and then when you're doing with men, you do the handshake. You don't shake it because it blurs in the camera. Slightly shoulders this way. And then also when you're doing pictures with ladies, it's customary to put your hand around their back, but you close your fist, cock it back, and then you try to get it to where the camera can see it so they can't charge you with any type of assault or anything that you use later. And it's just all these little things. Even
it all makes sense. But
even with the camera, they're like, for the Letterman interview, they said, all right, the box is this big. Remember that. So if you're going to do any hand and arm movements, it's got to be up here in front of your face. So, and that's kind of hard to do in a uniform because they're very tight. So it's,
right.
Yeah, it's just lots of training, lots of stuff to learn. And so for those months, I was the unofficial spokesperson for the Army, and they just, any requests, and they'd send me out, and I'd speak and tell the story, and that was, in a way, my counseling.
Well, you're very good at it, sir.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And I noticed when we were setting up, you're kind of looking at different angles and looking at things, and you taught me. So I appreciate that.
I hope I wasn't pompous. I was trying to correct myself because it's all presentation, but then the content is most important.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Well, when it comes to my job, I know it's necessary, but every time I travel, I don't like traveling that much. I don't like planes or airports. And when I speak, it hurts. And it's very expensive because, you know, I have my dog and my food. But people think that if you're a recipient, you know, you're made of money and that, oh, you just volunteer and go talk and things like that. But people that request recipients need to know that you're asking for something. You're asking them to relive that trauma. You're asking them to be recognized for reliving that trauma. And honestly, I really enjoy just staying at home and working with my So when people they request an appearance or a speech or even a video, they don't understand that this is painful and it's uncomfortable. And the only time I ever really do it is if they make it worth my while. And so that's why I started the business, and I have I make contracts for each and every one, and there's specific rules that need to be followed. And I'm really sorry that some people get upset that they say, oh yeah, can we come speak? And I was like, sure, I'd love to. It's going to cost this much and you have to sign right here. Sorry.
No, don't be sorry.
No, I mean, I'm sorry that they get upset.
Yeah, I know.
Because
I
they
know
think that I'm or that recipients or celebrities that, you know, have this huge trust fund to where they, you know, are well off. I'm well off now because I'm not well off, but I'm stable right now because of the recent stuff I did with the Outpost. But the rest of the time, I've got 3 beautiful daughters that I pay child support for. I still got bills, and I've got expensive hobbies. Building guns is expensive.
Yes.
But I know that, like I said, it's necessary, and it helps people, and that's why I'm continuing to do it. I thought about shutting down the business a couple of times because I get so tired and so drained from speaking that, you know.
We'll space it out. And
that's what I'm doing. So the only time I ever go and travel now is that you really gotta convince me to go out there. And with the Netflix series coming out in a couple weeks, and then of course the movie coming out in a year, I'm probably going to be really busy. So I'll just have to keep on raising the just so I can stay at home and appreciate this beautiful land that I live on.
And that it is for sure. You've done well for yourself, sir. Well, I've taken up enough of your time. There's a couple of things maybe we can talk about off air, but we'll wrap this up. I appreciate your time more than you'll ever know.
Thank you.
It's an honor to sit here. I know you probably hear it all the time, and you're also probably at the cocktail hour in the afternoon where the drunk guy's bumping into you, and you're just going, "Why am I here?"
That only happens. That only happens every once in a while. I don't wear stuff that promotes who I am or what I do. A lot of the people in town, downtown Bastrop, they know me, and the uncomfortable / oh my gosh, that so and so is gone. Now I'm just a guy that shows up, and nobody really knows who I am unless somebody says something, and then they go on Wikipedia, they Google, right. And then they ask for the handshakes and the pictures, and as soon as one person does that, oh, why are they taking a picture? And then it escalates to where I have to leave. It's like, hey, if I'm out and about, I'm here to socialize with my friends. I don't.
Right.
It's not that I don't like it. It's just that it's uncomfortable for me to have to put on the face, be the nice guy. I'd rather be, just enjoying a cigar, drinking, and telling jokes to my friends versus the other stuff. So, but yeah, I can disappear pretty easily, and then it makes it very nice.
Okay. Well, let's wrap it up. Put a bow on
it.
And
yes, sir.
I know it'll not be media correct, but I'm going to reach across in the camera here and shake your hand.
Oh, absolutely. I was looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thanks, buddy. And that's a wrap, man. Thanks, everybody.
No one ever said that everything was ever supposed to be perfect. I might have heard somebody tell me once that it was supposed to be worth it. So here I go again, and I'm all on my own again, and I've become embattled and wounded. I guess I'm not the kind of guy that's used to being covered in bruises. I wanna be Superman. I'm trying to pretend, trying to pretend, I'm trying to pretend that everything's okay. And oh, after all that's said and done, I wanna be somebody who'll fix it. Somebody who can run around from town to town, somebody who's gifted. Yeah, I wanna be Superman. I'm trying to pretend, I'm trying to pretend, I'm trying to said that anything was ever supposed to be perfect. I might have heard somebody tell me once that it was supposed to be worth it.